Just to correct some misinformation that has been making the rounds on social media recently, especially around the topics of the transatlantic slave trade and also issues to do with the African culture. Um, I believe that we must have honest and open conversations around these topics so that we not only synthesize the correct approach to the way forward in dealing with these issues, but also we uh, do not run the risk of romanticizing certain aspects of our culture and our society, which would necessarily not help us move forward as a people. And quick things that I just wanted to highlight is that, first of all, the transatlantic slave trade would never have been possible if uh, the elite group of people, the chieftainship and the kingship in the regions, West Africa and South Central Africa, where slaves were taken from, if the elite and the kingship and the chieftainship had not sold their people into slavery, this is something that you really need to take, a minute to pause on and think about it. These people were sold. They were collected by their own people, fellow black men, captured, sorted out, and sold to the white men. It wasn't the white men going into the inland, into the tribal lands and gathering up people. It was black people, Africans, doing this on fellow Africans. And hence we ended up losing over 10 million of our inhabitants during that time, which could have contributed to the success of Africa today. So when we think about slavery, it's usually presented in a way that lays the blame squarely on the white man's shoulder, when this would not be possible if we had not sold our own people. And this is a historical fact that we need to reckon with. And also think about it. It wasn't the same region where slaves had been taken from in Africa that lobbied for the end of slavery. Why? Because they were profiting from slavery. They basically had found an economic system that sustained the rich and the elite. Um, and also, if you look at the African culture, we we speak about these ideals of or Ubuntu and the renaissance of African wisdom and all these romanticized aspects of our culture today. But if we go back into history, we'll see that there was a lot that was done by Africans through fellow Africans that still much reflects our society today in in Africa. Quick examples: ancient sites of Mapungubwe and the Great Zimbabwe, where class systems existed to serve the royals, where people lived their entire lives to serve the royals, which stayed on top of a hill while the rest of the people stayed on the lower, on the lower, on the lower grounds. And these people lived to mine, um, to tend the flocks, agriculture, and they were the workers of that time. And for most of them, they did not have a choice but to do the bidding of the then kings and the royals of that time. And this is something that we need to deal with, rather than speaking as if Africa was this utopia back then of socialist societies where people shared equally in everything. This was not the case. Um, there's a well-known king in the African culture known as King Munomotapa. Munomotapa means the prince that conquers or subjugates. Um, and in our language, the Shona language, we have a word that says Napra. Napra is the person that Atapra, right? So it's a connected term, but Napra means a slave. And there's a reason why we have that term in our own language. So slavery was not introduced by Europeans. slavery was a part of the African culture. And even now, there are mass genocides that we don't talk about of the San group of peoples, known now as the Bushmen. When the Bantu migration happened, 200 AD, arriving in southern Africa, there were communities of the San speaking groups of people known as the Bushmen, um, which we subjugated, and most of them were killed off, and most of them only survived, were running away, and only surviving in the Namib and the Botswana deserts, where even up to today their descendants can still be found. So nobody is honest about those things, and how we treated each other, and how we had these classes of divisions in our own societies, which are mostly reflected in the societies that we have today. Look at most African governments today. The president and his cronies and people are linked to him are the ones that enjoy the best out of the land. They've got houses. There's so much corruption that is centered around serving this elite group of people, which reflects exactly the same culture that we had back in the day. Were there good aspects about our cultures? Definitely. Yes, there are gems that we can pick up from there. But what I want us to avoid is to have this utopian idea of a past Africa that never existed. And once we start delving into those conversations with honesty and openness intellectually, then we can actually formulate our own path, reflecting where we were, where we are today, and where we need to be. There's more that I'll share on these topics in the other videos that I'm going to share with you. And also, a quick thing before I go is that Black Americans that descended from Africans, should now stop referring to them as African Americans. There's nothing African about their culture, their language, their dressing, nothing at all African about their identity. And they should be proud to embrace the American identity, said as it is in terms of its foundations and its roots. But that is the honest truth. You are not less American than a white person whose forefathers came to America. It's been 400 years, and it's high time you embrace that American identity. And I know these are all well-meaning people, but it's a system that is designed to put you down, to make you less of an American than what you are. Just as much as white people that have been born in Africa, we don't call them European Africans. They are simply Africans because they are part of this continent, just as much as you're part of the continent that you exist in today. So let's open up the discussion around these issues and have conversations that narrow down on the truth and the facts of what exactly happened in history, and how we can tackle these challenges, and how Pan-Africanism can be shaped not by simply taking a one glove fits all approach, but we need to dissect these issues and see where we are, and reflect on these topics with an open minded intellect.